Welcome to the A.D.K channel. My name is Kirk, and today we're going to be reviewing an album called Stargazer by a band called Crypt of Reason. So who is this artist? They're a progressive death doom stroke post-metal act from Belarus, and Stargazer is released on the 24th of September and it will be their debut album. The band members are Alexander Naumenko, the vocalist, Vladimir Isotov, who's the drummer and provides backing vocals, and the bass player is called Konstantin Nikiforov. Also on this album, we've got a guest appearance from a vocalist called Zugved, and the guitars are provided by Alex Sedin. Interestingly, Alex Sedin is the person who produced that 2022 album False Lights by that highly acclaimed post-black metal Ukrainian band Whitewood. So he's got some form, and he's actually produced and mixed and mastered this record and stepped in on guitar. Why has he done that? Let me give you some context. This album is in memory of Pavel Minutin, the band's former guitarist, who sadly passed away in 2016 when they started writing this record. Stargazer is the band's debut album and long-awaited follow-up to their 2013 Creation of Despair EP. On the Bandcamp page, it also gives a summary of what this album is and how it came into being. So Stargazer has been crafted from drafts and demos, arranged and produced by the band, and is now ready to see the light. It's interesting to note that Pavel Minutin wrote the lyrics and the music for this LP. So let's get into it. The album starts with a song called Dissolving in Fractal Chaos, and this begins with a dense guitar arpeggio that rings out in slow rotation and invites another layer of low-tuned guitar to join in with the first drum accent. The vocals are masculine and anguished in the higher reaches of the human chest, a bit like when you sip on some hot soup and it goes down into your chest, doesn't it? Can you imagine if you were to roar to let out the pain? That's what it sounds like here, very guttural though. The drummer fills the spaces with double kick eighth notes throughout, which is useful because this is your typical death doom tempo, so it would normally just be kick, snare with a few fills. At least he's got some double kick eighth notes in there to keep things interesting. The bassist belches underneath as if he's leading the charge of a noise rock band. This music's tense, it's agitated and ready to collapse under the weight of its own anxiety, like the post-metal stylings of Cult of Luma, perhaps. And I always ask this question when I hear music, certainly metal music from Russia and Belarus. What is it about these bands that leads them to produce such forceful metal vocals? I mean, this is fucking terrifying. So when we move on to track number 2, Illusions of Meanings, this one starts with a lingering sorrow that saunters throughout the song, led by a semi-distorted arpeggio and a slow beat. I've got to say, the audio engineer does a great job here of capturing all the instruments in the mix and keeping it as close to possible as you'd imagine a live sound to be in a small public hall. Alex Sedin's guitar tone is dry and abrasive like Inter Armour, and the drummer Vladimir Isotov lays down the half-timing groove here, but likes to speed things up with spasms of blast beats when you least expect them. At this stage, there's little to criticise. Maybe the guitars could explore more of the mid to high range frets, but this is trivial. Moving on to track number 3, Argon. We think we've figured out the sound, don't we, after 2 songs, so this is where we can be more ready to cast a critical eye on the music. This one starts like the other 2 with a cautious guitar sending out an SOS signal for anybody who can help. Alexander Naumenko has 2 vocal styles here, the Barbarian and the Tortured Poet. Let me explain. The Barbarian is the deep guttural voice, and the Poet can be found in the whispered spoken word passages. I hear a lot more palm muting in this effort from the guitars as well, nice and thick like a steel wall. And there's the first sign of a sentimental melody that emerges here at the 3-minute mark, with the bass following the luscious guitars, a bit like The Dreadful Hours by My Dying Bride. It sets up the return to the distortion and despair in style, and now you can feel your ribcage throbbing. When we move on to track number 4, this is what it probably feels like if you harbour thoughts about jumping off a precipice. So this song's called Lemma, and the clean guitars writhe underneath and present a false sense of security as the gory vocals guide the band forward. You can hear the bassist Konstantin working his frets underneath in contentment. And remember, the band's roots are in death doom, which explains why the vocals are bloodthirsty and not grounded in that incandescent rage that you associate with post-metal. This song's linear rather than repetitive, and to be honest, it does pass you by on repeat listens. We reach the middle part of this record and there's a real danger here of the momentum being squandered, and I'll explain why. When we get to track number 5, Saviour, this is only 2 minutes and 33 seconds, and you can hear an electronic kick drum throbbing the main beats, which is unusual in a slow doom metal combination of bass and snare. Alexander Naumenko whispers his way through the eerie guitars and atmospherics as if reciting a dream under the influence of hypnosis. You've got to ask, is the aim here to write a transition piece to the next song? It reminds me of Anathema in the Alternative 4 and Judgment era. So when we get to the next song, which is track number 6, The Origin Curse, you start to wonder. It's hard to think of a composition on this album that doesn't begin with a pondering arpeggio and introverted drum beat. It's all starting to sound the same. It'd be beneficial to do something different here at this stage. I mean, musically, it reminds me, this song, of American darkwave legends Lycia. And you wonder after 2 minutes, though, if they'll change the dynamics and reach for a finale, but they actually do the opposite, and they cut out the drums and bass for a spell of contemplation. To me, this is the third consecutive song that feels like an interlude rather than the main event. I'm pleased to say that the band get things back on track, and they do it in style for the last third of this album. Track number 7, Erebus, is actually the lead single, or at least the one song that they've pre-released leading up to this album. And you can see why. You know, the muddy guitars and croaky bass notes work in tandem with the hostile vocals, with the same efficacy as the latest album from that Boston post-metal unit, Mourn, whose 2023 Engraved with Pain LP is well worth checking out. In fact, this song is closer to the grandiosity of post-metal than the morbid indulgence of Death Doom. Listen how the drummer modulates to psychopathic skank beats at the 3-minute mark. More of this would enhance the listening experience. Track number 8, fantastic song. They really continue with what they've created on Erebus. So this is called Hollow Cycles, and it's clear to me that Anathema's 1995 album, The Silent Enigma, is a big influence on this record, certainly on this track. Hesitant guitar arpeggios flow like quiet water streams under the shadow of a slow but firm drum beat before the guitars step on the distortion. And that comes after 2 minutes. Then it turns into like a furious metal affair with an abundance of twists and turns that remains anchored in that grandiose doom aesthetic, a bit like the pioneers of this, Neurosis. We reach the final track, which is called The Bliss of Quiet, and it's only 2 minutes and 15 seconds at track number 9, and you wonder, is this just going to be a soothing interlude or mood piece to exit the stage? And it's not. This is arguably the heaviest song on the album. Chugging guitar patterns threaten to break out into death metal here, but the drums remain in that solemn death march tempo. It's got no tangible structure and ends in a dirge of like these weird destructive sound effects and malfunctioning glitches. And to be honest, you'll still scratch your head after repeat listens, but it's worth playing just because it's so goddamn heavy, and it's just quite surprising that they end the listening experience at this level of intensity. So what are my final thoughts on this album? Well, this band understand their true sound and have no reason to take risks or second guess the listener, because the post-metal and death doom aesthetics come natural to them. They've been doing this since 2013. You can easily listen to this album during a long walk in the countryside or even on a long train journey, because there's a lot to absorb. Often you'll detect two competing guitar channels with neither dominating, and to be honest, it's a pleasure to deconstruct these through headphones. Likewise, Alexander Naumenko's vocals rely on guttural strength, but he avoids that monotone pitfall of many death metal bands and puts his anguish into the music. However, too many of these songs start the same, with a simple, clean-picked arpeggio waiting to guide the drums and distorted guitars, and the middle parts of this album, as we've already said, almost derail the momentum. It's like they've put 3 consecutive interludes in the middle of this LP from track 4 to track 6, and you probably need at least one of those 3 to be more purposeful rather than just a transition point to another transition. Overall though, this is an album with definite repeat listening value and many subtle challenges as well that you want to understand and overcome and can enjoy and absorb. And the remaining members of this band have done a superb job of bringing Pavel Minutin's lyrics and songs to life and taking them from an embryonic, unfinished demo stage to the completion stage and adding their own innovations. So we come to the final verdict then, our judgment. So as a reminder, we actually have 4 categories to judge how much we've enjoyed an album and whether we would recommend it. So the 4 categories: the first one, the highest grading, you are a headliner. The second highest, you are the main support. Third highest, you are the opener, as in the opening band. And if we can't get into this record and we just don't like it, we would say back to rehearsals. So with this one, I think it's quite obvious that I enjoyed it. This album is the equivalent to a main support, and you would enjoy watching Crypt of Reason as the main support for a band like Cult of Luna or Mourn. So go out, download, stream it, buy it on CD from Bandcamp. This album is released on the 24th of September. Remember to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video for the ADK Rock and Metal channel.